The knock on her door came after midnight, a fist against splintered pine that sounded like a death knell. Elara Vance, a widow with nothing left but her name, opened it to a ghost in the rain. He was a giant of a man, Caelan, the one the town called the Breed, and he was broken. In his arms he held a tiny, frail bundle. His voice, a rumble of thunder and grief, spoke the words that would shatter her world. "Can you pretend to be my wife for 1 week?" It wasn't a proposition. It was a plea to save a newborn baby from a man who would stop at nothing to possess her. The wind in Redemption Creek, Wyoming, didn't just whistle, it clawed. It was a physical, spiteful thing that found every crack in Elara Vance's shoddy cabin at the edge of the decent part of town. Elara, a woman who had been a wife and was now just a widow, sat at her small table, mending a dress for one of the saloon girls, the only work she could get that didn't involve being one of them. She was 28, but the high plains and grief had aged her. Her husband, Silas, had been a good man, a dreamer who believed in this harsh land. The land hadn't believed in him. A rock slide in the copper mine had left Elara with his name, his debts, and a hollow space in her chest that ached with every breath. Now she was 2 days from eviction. Mrs. Gable, her landlady, a woman whose piety was as sharp as her gaze, had made that clear. "Decent folk," she'd said, "don't associate with your kind, Mrs. Vance." Her kind was poor. That was when the knock came. It wasn't a polite tap. It was a heavy, desperate pounding that rattled the jam. Elara's heart seized. It was too late for Mrs. Gable and too forceful for a customer. She grabbed the iron poker from the cold hearth and pulled the door open a crack. He filled the entire frame, blocking the moonlight. Caelan. The townsfolk only ever called him Cale or the Breed. He was a towering figure, known more as a local legend than a man. Half Cherokee, half something else. He lived alone on the ridge, trapping and trading, speaking only when necessary. His size was intimidating, a solid wall of muscle and frontier grit, but it was his face that held her. His features were stark, noble, and tonight they were utterly shattered by a grief so raw it was terrifying. Rain dripped from his long black hair, which he wore unbound, not braided like the tribes further south. He was breathing hard, as if he'd run all the way from the ridge, and in his massive arms, wrapped in a sodden wool blanket, was a baby. "Mr. Caelan?" Elara whispered, her hand tightening on the poker. His eyes, dark as a new moon sky, met hers. He didn't seem to have the breath to speak. He just looked at her, his gaze pleading, and then down at the bundle. A tiny mewling cry, thin as a thread, escaped it. She's sick," he finally rumbled, his voice thick. My wife, Sarah, she's gone. The birth, He couldn't finish. Elara's resolve softened. She knew that grief. She opened the door wider. "Bring her in. By the fire." He moved past her, his presence seeming to suck all the air from the tiny cabin. He knelt by the hearth, unwrapping the bundle with hands that were trembling, hands that looked large enough to palm a boulder, but were now impossibly gentle. Inside was the smallest human being Elara had ever seen. A tiny girl with a shock of dark hair and a pale, pinched face. She was cold, her lips tinged with blue. "She won't take the goat's milk," Caelan said, his voice cracking. "She hasn't eaten in a day. I don't know what to do." Elara moved instinctively, grabbing her last clean flannel, warming it by the fire and wrapping the baby tightly. "She needs warmth. And sugar water for now." She bustled, her own desperation forgotten, replaced by the immediate, pressing need of this new life. For an hour they worked. Elara managed to get a few drops of lukewarm, sweetened water into the baby's mouth using the corner of a rag. Caelan just watched, his huge frame hunched over, a statue of misery. "What is her name?" Ilara asked softly, rocking the finally quiet infant. "Lily," he whispered. "Sarah," wanted Lily. They sat in silence, the only sounds the wind and the baby's shallow breathing. "Mr. Caelan, why did you come to me?" Ilara finally asked. "The doctor. Doc Medford is a drunk, and the others." He looked away. "I hear them. What they call me. What they'd say." He knew no decent woman in town would help him. He had come to the only other outcast he could think of. He took a deep, shuddering breath and looked at her, his eyes raw. "This is not why I came." Ilara paused. I have a letter." He reached into his wet leather tunic and pulled out a damp, folded piece of paper. It came on the Laramie stage. From him. Him. Barnaby Shaw, my wife's, Sarah's, father. The name was spoken like a curse. He's a baron. Cattle, railroads, politicians. He owns men. He never forgave Sarah for marrying me. He called her defiled. Ilara's blood ran cold. She'd heard of Barnaby Shaw. Who hadn't? "He's coming," Caelan said, his voice flat. "He's bringing the circuit judge, Elias Thorne. They'll be here in 1 week. He has petitioned the court to take Lily, to declare me an unfit father, a savage. He will win. He always wins." Ilara looked at the tiny, fragile life in her arms. The idea of this child being taken from this grieving man, even if he was a stranger, felt like a violation. "What can you do?" she asked. Caelan stared into the fire, his face a mask of agony. He finally turned to her, and the shame in his eyes was worse than the grief. He, a man who looked like he could wrestle a bear, was on his knees. "He says a single man, a half-breed, has no right to a white child. The law will agree. The judge will agree. But a family." He swallowed. The motion pained. "Mrs. Vance. Ilara. I need a wife, just until the judge leaves." Ilara's breath caught. She thought she'd misheard. "What? Can you pretend to be my wife for 1 week?" The words hung in the air, absurd and terrifying. That's insane, Mr. Caelan. It's a lie. They'll find out." "They won't," he insisted, leaning forward, his desperation a tangible force. "You're a widow. I'm a widower. We grieve. We find comfort. We marry quickly, quietly. A frontier wedding. People will talk, but it's plausible. It's a story. It's better than the one Shaw is coming to tell." "Why me?" she whispered again, terrified. "Because you have nothing to lose," he said. Not cruelly, but as a statement of fact. "And I have everything." He saw the fear and refusal in her eyes, and fumbled in his pocket, pulling out a small, heavy leather pouch. He untied it and poured its contents onto the table. Gold coins, double eagles, it was a fortune, more money than she had seen in her entire life. "This is all of it," he said. "My trapping for 3 seasons. Sarah's, she had a little. It's yours. Pay Mrs. Gable. Pay your husband's debts. Take the stage to San Francisco. Be whoever you want to be. Just give me this 1 week. Help me save my daughter." Ilara looked at the gold. It was a new life. She looked at Caelan. He was a desperate father. She looked at Lily, who had finally fallen asleep in her arms, a small, warm weight against her own empty heart. 1 week, Ilara said, her voice trembling. "And then I am gone." 1 week, Caelan agreed, slumping in relief, his head bowing as if in prayer. God help us. The journey to Caelan's cabin was a trial. He'd carried Lily, wrapped against his chest, while Ilara rode his mule, clutching her small bag of belongings, They left before dawn, 2 shadows slipping out of Redemption Creek, hoping to avoid the town's prying eyes. As the sun rose, it revealed the ridge Kaelin called home. It wasn't the savage encampment Elara had half expected. It was a sturdy, impressive cabin built of thick, hand-hewn logs, nestled in a stand of aspen. It sat perfectly between 2 worlds, overlooking the sprawling, civilized valley to the east, and backing into the wild, unclaimed mountains of his Cherokee ancestors to the west. The inside was spotless, masculine, yes, filled with tanned hides, stacked firewood, and the clean scent of pine and leather. But it was no hut. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall. Books lined a rough-hewn shelf. Shakespeare, poetry by Mr. Keats, a thick volume on agriculture. This was not the home of an ignorant savage. And then there was Sarah's ghost. A small rocking chair sat by the fire, a half-finished quilt, a delicate, intricate, double wedding ring pattern draped over it. On a small table, a porcelain teacup sat next to a tin of expensive tea. She liked to sit here, Kaelin said, his voice thick. He motioned to the main room. You can take the bed. I'll sleep by the fire. The bed was a rope mattress in the corner, but it was separated by a hanging blanket, offering a sliver of privacy. The reality of the next 7 days crashed down on Elara. She was alone, miles from town, with a man she didn't know and his fragile, sick baby. The first 2 days were a blur of awkwardness and desperation. Lily was weak. Her cries were thin, and she fought the goat's milk Kaelin had. Elara, remembering old wives' tales from her mother, tried a mix of barley water and a single drop of brandy. The baby, miraculously, began to take it. They worked as a team, falling into a strange, domestic rhythm. Elara would wash the rags and tend to the baby, while Kaelin would chop wood, hunt, and sit for hours, just watching Lily breathe. They barely spoke, but the silence was filled with the shared task. Elara learned the man. He wasn't just quiet, he was observant. He moved with a silent grace that was unnerving for a man his size. He was gentle, his big hands surprisingly adept at changing the baby's wrappings. He'd also been educated. The Carlisle School, he told her one night, staring into the fire. Back east. They sent me to kill the Indian, save the man. They taught me their words, their God, their history. But you came back, Elara said. I learned one thing, Kaelin said, his voice hard. How to hate them, and how to hate myself. I came back here, but I didn't belong. Not to my mother's people, not to my father's. I was just Kaelin. And Sarah, Elara asked gently. She was the same. He smiled, a rare, sad thing. Rich, educated. But she hated that world. She ran away, came west with a church group. She saw me. Not the breed, just me. And I saw her. This was their story, the one they were meant to tell. A grieving widower and a compassionate widow, finding solace. It felt almost true. On the 3rd day, the lie escalated. A lone rider approached the cabin. Elara recognized the tin star immediately. Sheriff Brody. Brody was a man who believed in a simple, black-and-white world. Kaelin had always been a grey area he didn't appreciate. Kaelin, Brody called, not dismounting. Town's whispering. Mrs. Gable says you abducted the widow Vance. Kaelin stepped onto the porch, blocking the door. Elara came of her own free will. Doing what exactly? Brody squinted, trying to peer inside. Seems indecent, her being up here, alone, with you, and that child. Elara's heart hammered. This was the first test. She stepped out onto the porch, smoothing her apron. I'm helping with the baby, Sheriff. As a favor. Brody's eyes narrowed. That's not what Mrs. Gable—" "No," Caelan said, his voice a low command. Ilara looked at him, confused. He stepped to her side. He didn't touch her, but his proximity was a shield. "Ilara, tell him the truth." Ilara's mind raced. What truth? The lie? Caelan's eyes met hers. They were dark, intense, and commanding. "Trust me. Follow my lead." "Sheriff," Caelan said, his voice ringing with a false, practiced confidence. "You're right. It would be indecent. Which is why we made it right." Brody's jaw dropped slightly. "Made it right?" Caelan looked at Ilara, his gaze softening just enough to be convincing. With Sarah gone, and Ilara, Silas gone, this is a hard land to be alone in." He took a breath. "We were married 2 days ago. The old mission priest, Father Thomas, performed the ceremony before he left the territory." Ilara felt the blood drain from her face. Married? This was not the bargain. Pretend had been one thing. A false legal claim was something else entirely. It was a crime. Sheriff Brody was stunned into silence. A marriage. It was fast, scandalously fast, but it was legal. It was clean. It boxed him in. "Married," Brody repeated, tasting the word. He looked from the giant, impassive Caelan to the pale, trembling Ilara. We wanted a quiet ceremony," Ilara stammered, finding her voice. "Given our grief, we didn't want the town's attention." Brody grunted. He didn't like it, but he couldn't dispute it. Father Thomas was indeed gone, already on a wagon train to Oregon. There was no one to ask. "Well," the sheriff grunted, tipping his hat awkwardly. "My congratulations, I suppose, Mrs. Caelan." He turned his horse, visibly displeased at having his suspicions neutered. "You watch yourself, Caelan. Shaw's in Laramie, and he's not a man to cross." He rode off, leaving a cloud of dust and a new, terrible silence. Ilara turned on Caelan the second he was gone. "You lied to me," she hissed, her voice shaking with rage and fear. "You said pretend. You didn't say marriage. That's a federal crime." "Pretending wasn't enough," Caelan shot back, his own calm shattering. "Shaw is bringing lawyers. They would have torn Helper apart in a second. They would have painted you as my whore. A paid actress." "I am a paid actress." "No," he roared, and the force of it made her step back. You are the only thing protecting that child. Wife is a legal claim. Wife has rights. Wife against grandfather is a fight. Savage against baron is a slaughter. Don't you see? I just gave you a sword." He was breathing heavily, his fists clenched. "Father Thomas is gone. No one can prove it. No one can disprove it. It's our word. It's all we have." Ilara stared at him, her anger warring with a cold, sinking realization. He was right. He had trapped her. But he had also trapped Barnaby Shaw. The lie was no longer a simple favor. It was a conspiracy. She was no longer an actress. She was a co-conspirator. "God help us," she whispered, repeating his words from the first night. "He has to," Caelan said, turning to look at the mountains, "because Barnaby Shaw is on his way." The lie settled over the cabin like a shroud. The forced intimacy, already potent, was now charged with the weight of a shared crime. They were Mr. and Mrs. Caelan, a title that felt like a mockery every time they had to use it. With Lily's health improving, the barley water and Ilara's constant care had brought a fragile pink back to her cheeks. Ilara found herself with time. Caelan was often out, checking his trap lines or hunting, giving them space he sensed they both desperately needed. It was during one of these absences that Ilara found the diary. She was airing out Sarah's trunk, hoping to find more props for their ruse. Clothes, perhaps a letter. At the very bottom, Beneath a stack of fine linen chemises was a small, leather-bound book. Ilara's hand trembled. This was an invasion. But Sarah was the ghost in this cabin. She was the woman Ilara was pretending to be, and the woman Kaelin was pretending to have replaced. To play the part, Ilara reasoned, she needed to understand the character. She sat in Sarah's rocking chair and opened the first page. The early entries were what she expected, the breathless, romantic prose of a young woman who had defied her wealthy family. October 14th. I have done it. I have married Kyle. My father will disown me, but I am free. Kaelin is not the savage father believes him to be. He is gentle and kind, and he sees the world in a way I never have. He is a good man. We will build a life here. Ilara felt a pang of jealousy, sharp and unexpected. But as the entries progressed into winter, the tone changed. The ink became more hurried, the loops and swirls more frantic. December 3rd. A letter from father. He knows. He did not yell. He did not threaten. It was worse. He sent congratulations. He sent money, which Kaelin, in his pride, refused. Father's kindness is a cold knife. He is waiting. He knows this land. He knows it will break me. He is waiting to pick up the pieces. Then, a darker turn. January 11th. The sickness is in my lungs again, the same one I had back in Boston. I told no one. I thought the clear air would cure me. I was a fool. It is worse. I cough up blood when Kyle is not looking. I am so very, very tired, Ilara gasped. Sarah had been sick before the birth. She had known. January 29th. I am with child. I should be happy, but I am terrified. I know what this means. I will not survive this. My body is too weak. Oh God, what have I done? I have trapped my love with a dying woman. Ilara's heart broke for the girl, and for Kaelin, who clearly had no idea. But the final entry, dated only a week before Lily's birth, was the one that stopped her heart. It was written in a shaky, frail hand. February 12th. Kyle is a good man, but he does not know the full truth. He cannot. He believes our love is enough to protect us. He does not understand my father. If father ever finds out who I truly was, who I knew, he will not just take the baby. He will destroy Kael. He will burn his world to the ground. And if he finds out about Elias, God help us all, Elias must be protected. The secret dies with me. Ilara's blood turned to ice. Elias. There was only one Elias she knew of, the man who was coming to judge them. Judge Elias Thorne. What secret? What was the connection? Was the judge involved with Sarah? Ilara's mind spun, rejecting the implication. But the name was there, in ink. The cabin, once a simple refuge, now felt like a trap, layered with secrets. Kaelin wasn't just a grieving widower. He was a man who had been lied to. Sarah wasn't just a tragic wife. She was a woman hiding a desperate secret. When Kaelin returned, Ilara said nothing. She couldn't. The diary felt like a loaded gun, and she didn't know who to aim it at. That night, the barrier between them, the one they'd built of polite fictions and shared duties, began to crack. Lily was fussing, a high-pitched, painful wail that wouldn't stop. Ilara had walked, she had rocked, she had sung. Kaelin, frustrated and helpless, watched from the shadows. "Give her to me," he finally said. Ilara, exhausted, handed the baby over. Kaelin took Lily and held her against his massive, bare chest. He began to hum. It wasn't a tune Ilara recognized. It was a low, resonant chant, a Cherokee lullaby. The rhythm was the sound of the earth, of deep roots and old mountains. Lily's cries softened, then quieted. Her small face, red and pinched, relaxed. She gripped his finger and slept. Ilara watched them, this giant, heartbroken man and the tiny, secret-filled baby. Her role in this play was changing. She hadn't just agreed to save a child. She had stepped into the center of a feud, a lie, and a secret that involved one of the most powerful men in the territory. She was no longer just afraid of Barnaby Shaw. She was terrified of the truth. The 1 week was half gone. The 4th day was marked by a new tension, a new silence. Kaelin and Ilara were orbiting each other. Polite strangers once more, the intimacy of the lullaby forgotten. Ilara was burdened by the diary's secret, and Kaelin was consumed by the dread of what was to come. It came in a cloud of dust. But it didn't come to the ridge. A rider from town, a boy Kaelin had paid to be a lookout, scrambled up the path. "He's here! Mr. Kaelin, he's here! A carriage! A fine black carriage, and 2 men on horseback. They're at the hotel." Barnaby Shaw had arrived. He didn't come to them. He summoned them. A note was delivered an hour later by a grim-faced man in a city suit. "Kaelin, I am at the Redemption Hotel. Bring my granddaughter. We will discuss the terms of your surrender. Be sure." "He will not see her," Kaelin growled, crushing the note in his fist. "Not like this. Not as a surrender. If he wants to see Lily, he comes to my home. He comes to her home." It was a power play, and a dangerous one. Ilara knew it, but she also saw the blazing pride in Kaelin's eyes. This was his one, small piece of ground to stand on. "He won't come," Ilara whispered. "He will," Kaelin said. "He needs to see her, to see Sarah in her." He was right. 2 hours later, 3 riders ascended the ridge. Ilara watched from the window. The first was Sheriff Brody, looking profoundly uncomfortable. The second was the man in the suit, who had cold, watchful eyes. The third was the Baron. Barnaby Shaw was not a dusty cattleman. He was a politician, a banker. He wore a tailored black coat, a fine beaver hat, and an expression of profound, icy disdain. He was not large, but his presence seemed to fill the valley. Kaelin met them on the porch. He held his rifle, but kept it pointed at the ground. "Mr. Shaw," Kaelin said, his voice a low rumble. "Kaelin." Shaw dismounted, brushing dust from his sleeve. He did not offer a hand. His eyes scanned the cabin, the hides, the rough-hewn wood, and the contempt on his face was palpable. "So this is the hovel my daughter traded her life for." "This was our home," Kaelin said, his voice dangerously quiet. Shaw's gaze finally landed on Ilara, who stood in the doorway, holding Lily wrapped in the cleanest blanket she had. "And who," Shaw sneered, "is this? The new help?" The man in the suit, who Ilara now understood was a detective or enforcer, smiled thinly. His name, she would learn, was Mr. Harlan. Ilara felt her courage falter. This man's arrogance was a physical force. But she looked down at Lily's sleeping face. "I am Ilara," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "Ilara Kaelin. I am his wife." Shaw's head snapped toward her. He hadn't expected this. He looked at Brody, who flushed and nodded. They claim they was married by Father Thomas, Mr. Shaw, 'fore he left." Shaw's eyes narrowed into slits. He stared at Ilara, dissecting her, her mended dress, her chapped hands, the widow's peak that spoke of a hard life. "A saloon girl," he scoffed. "A grave robber. How fitting. How much did he pay you, dear?" "I am his wife," Ilara repeated, clutching Lily tighter. "We shall see," Shaw said. He turned back to Kaelin, ignoring her. "Give me the child. No, it is my blood, my daughter's child. You will not raise her in this filth, to be a half-savage. I have come to take her home." "This is her home," Shaw smiled, a terrible, thin-lipped expression. "I have here," he said, pulling a sheaf of papers from his coat. "A document. It relinquishes your parental claim. It gives me full custody. In return, I am prepared to offer you $5,000. Elara gasped. Kalen didn't blink. "More money," Shaw continued, his voice like silk, "than your entire tribe has seen in a decade. Enough to make you a king among them. Go back to your people, Kalen. Leave this world. It was never meant for you." Kalen took the papers from Shaw's hand. He looked at them, then slowly, deliberately, tore them in half, and then in half again, letting the pieces flutter to the ground. Shaw's face went from pale to purple. Harlan's hand twitched toward his coat. "This is my daughter," Kalen said. "This is my land. You are not welcome here. The hearing is in 3 days. We will speak to the judge." "You will regret this," Shaw hissed, his voice venomous. "You will regret the day you ever looked at my daughter. I will strip you of everything. I will see you beg." He turned, mounted his horse, and with Harlan and Brody in tow, rode back down the ridge. The threat hung in the air, heavy and toxic. Elara was shaking so hard she could barely stand. "It's all right," Kalen said, his voice rough. He touched her shoulder, the first time he had ever touched her voluntarily. "He's just a man." "He's not," Elara whispered, looking at the torn papers on the ground. "He's a monster. And Mr. Harlan, he was looking at me. Really looking." Kalen nodded, his face grim. "He's a detective, Shaw's man. He won't believe the marriage. He's going to go to town. He's going to dig." The lie which had seemed so clever now felt like a very, very shallow grave. Mr. Harlan did not leave town with Shaw. Shaw remained at the hotel, a spider in his web, but Harlan became his agent. He was a quiet, polite man who moved through Redemption Creek with unnerving efficiency. He started at Mrs. Gable's boarding house. He spoke to the saloon owner. He bought Doc Medford enough whiskey to loosen his tongue. Within 24 hours, he had a complete, devastating picture of Elara Vance, a destitute, grieving widow, evicted, desperate, and alone. He also confirmed that Father Thomas had indeed left town before the date Kalen and Elara had claimed for their marriage. The noose was tightening. In the cabin, the atmosphere was suffocating. Elara and Kalen were trapped, waiting for the hearing. The pretense of husband and wife had to be maintained, even in private, lest a surprise visit from Brody or Harlan catch them off guard. They were forced to talk, to build a history. Kalen told her about his trap lines, about the way his mother taught him to read the stars. Elara spoke of Silas, of their dreams. It was a strange, inverted courtship, building a past for a marriage that didn't exist. The weight of the diary was crushing Elara. Kalen deserved to know. But how could she tell him? How could she add, "Your wife lied to you," to the burdens he already carried? She had to. "Kalen," she said that night, as he oiled his rifle, When you met Sarah, did she ever speak of a man named Elias?" Kalen paused. He looked up, his eyes searching hers. "Elias? No. Why?" I found her diary." His face hardened. "You read it. I was looking for things to make the story real." Elara's voice was small. She was sick, Kalen. Before the baby. She knew she was dying." Kalen's knuckles went white on the rifle stock. What? She told me it was just a winter cough." He looked away, his jaw working. The betrayal hit him, a physical blow. "She lied." "She was scared," Elara said gently. "She was scared of her father. But there was something else. She mentioned a man, Elias. She said he had to be protected. Kalen, Judge Elias Thorne, that's his name." Kalen stood up, the chair scraping loudly. The implication hung in the air, that Sarah and the judge— "No," Caelan said. But the denial was weak. He was recalculating. Sarah's frantic moods, her unexplained sadness, her terror of her father. It can't be." Before they could speak further, a shadow fell across the door. Mr. Harlan was back, this time alone. He didn't knock, just rapped on the open doorframe. "Good evening, Mrs. Caelan," he said, his voice smooth. "May I have a word?" Caelan moved to stand beside Elara. "We have nothing to say to you." "Oh, I think you do." Harlan stepped inside, uninvited. He was holding a small ledger. "I've been speaking with Mrs. Gable, a lovely woman, very precise with her accounts. She says you," he nodded at Elara, "were 3 months behind on rent, destitute." He then looked at the saloon owner's ledger. "And you were mending dresses for 2 bits a frock, enough to buy bread, not enough to live." He snapped the ledgers shut. "A woman with no prospects, a man who needs a wife to secure a child. It's transactional and quite fraudulent." "Get out," Caelan growled. "And then there's the matter of Father Thomas," Harlan continued, ignoring him. "He passed through 2 weeks ago, but according to the stable master, he left on the morning stage. The day before, you claim he married you. Perjury is a serious offense, Mr. Caelan." He had them. He had the proof. The lie was shattered. Elara felt the floor drop out from under her. They were ruined. "The hearing is tomorrow," Harlan said, smiling. "Judge Thorne will be very interested in my findings. Mr. Shaw is a generous man. He's still willing to offer the 5,000. I'd reconsider it. It's that, or prison." He tipped his hat and left. Silence. Utter, hopeless silence. Caelan sank onto the stool, his head in his hands. "He's right. He has us." Elara looked at the man who had been a giant just days ago, now reduced to this. She looked at Lily, sleeping, oblivious. The diary. Elias. "No," Elara said, a strange, cold clarity cutting through her fear. "He doesn't." "Elara, he proved it's a lie." "He proved our lie," Elara said, her mind racing. "But he doesn't know Sarah's lie. He doesn't know the real secret." Caelan looked up, confused. "What?" "He thinks this is about you and me," Elara said, pacing. "He thinks the fight is Caelan versus Shaw, but it's not. The diary, Sarah, Elias. That's the real story. We just have to figure out how to use it." Caelan was lost. But Elara suddenly wasn't. She had been a victim her whole life, a victim of poverty, of widowhood, of circumstance. She was tired of it. "He's right about one thing," Elara said, her voice hard. "The hearing is tomorrow, and we will be there." "With what?" Caelan asked, his voice hollow. "The truth? That we lied?" "Yes," Elara said, stopping. She looked at Caelan, her eyes bright with a terrifying, desperate gamble. "We're going to tell the truth. Just not the one they expect." And then, as if to seal their fate, a new, terrible sound. Lily, who had been sleeping, woke with a sharp, barking cough. A real cough. Elara rushed to her. The baby's forehead was burning. "Fever," she whispered, her voice breaking. All her scheming, all her courage, vanished. "Oh God, Caelan, she's really sick." The legal battle, the lies, the secrets, it all faded. The rest of the night was a desperate vigil. They were no longer conspirators. They were just 2 parents, fighting a much older, more relentless enemy. Death. They forced broth and cool water. They used cold compresses. They prayed to a god neither of them was sure listened. By morning, the fever had broken. But Lily was pale and frighteningly weak. The fight for her life and the fight for her custody were about to happen on the same day. The Redemption Creek Saloon was not a hall of justice. It stank of stale beer and desperation. But with Judge Elias Thorne in town, the pool tables were shoved aside, a high-backed chair was placed on the stage, and it became a courtroom. The room was packed. Barnaby Shaw sat at a front table, flanked by Mr. Harlan and a slick, expensive-looking lawyer from Laramie. The decent folk of the town, including Mrs. Gable, sat behind them, eager to see the savage put in his place. Judge Elias Thorne entered. He was a tall, imposing man in his late 40s, with a stern face, a square jaw, and eyes that missed nothing. Ilara's heart hammered. This was Elias. He looked every bit the powerful, unbending man Sarah had described. The court calls the petition of Barnaby Shaw for custody of the infant child. Lily, Shaw, the bailiff announced. Caelan, Caelan said, standing. His voice was rough from the night's vigil. Her name is Lily Caelan. Shaw's lawyer stood. Your Honour, that is precisely the matter at hand. We are here to prove that this man, Caelan, a man of no means, no standing, and an unstable, half-savage nature, is unfit to care for my client's granddaughter. For an hour he painted his picture. He called Sheriff Brodie, who reluctantly recounted the suspicious nature of Caelan's life. He called Mrs. Gable, who spoke of Ilara's destitution and low moral character, and then he called Mr. Harlan. Harlan laid out his findings with chilling precision. The ledgers, the debts, and finally, the stagecoach timeline. So you see, Your Honour, Harlan concluded, the claim of marriage is a fraud. Father Thomas left on the 10 more a.m. stage on Tuesday. Mr. Caelan claims they were married that afternoon. It is a physical impossibility. This woman, he pointed at Ilara, is not his wife. She is a hireling, a perjurer, paid to defraud this court. The room erupted in whispers. Shaw smiled. Judge Thorne's face was grim. He looked at Caelan. Mr. Caelan, you have a response to these very serious allegations? Caelan stood. He held the sleeping, or perhaps exhausted, Lily in his arms. He looked at the judge. Your Honour, Mr. Harlan is right about one thing. We lied. The room gasped. Ilara felt the air leave her lungs. This wasn't the plan. I was desperate, Caelan continued, his voice cracking with exhaustion and grief. I knew what Shaw would do. I knew he would paint me as a savage, and I knew this town and this court would believe him. Is that not true? Do any of you, he looked at the townsfolk, see a man, or do you see the breed? So I asked Mrs. Vance for help, to lie for me, because the law, your law, does not protect men like me. It does not protect my daughter. So you admit the fraud, Shaw's lawyer shouted. I admit my desperation, Caelan said. This is an outrage. Shaw stood. He has admitted his guilt. He has proven himself unstable and a criminal. I demand you grant my petition. Judge Thorne banged his gavel. Silence, Mr. Shaw. I will hear Mr. Caelan out. But his eyes were cold. Caelan's confession had sealed their fate. I have nothing else to say, Caelan said, his shoulders slumping. He had given up. He had tried to be honest, and it had failed. Your Honour, Ilara's voice rang out, sharp and clear. She stood up. She was trembling, but her eyes were burning. Mr. Caelan is not done. Mrs. Vance, you are in contempt, the judge began. Mr. Caelan told his truth, Ilara said, walking forward. But he doesn't know the whole truth. He lied to protect his daughter. But his wife, Sarah, lied to protect him. Shaw's lawyer scoffed. More slander, Your Honour. I have her diary, Ilara shouted, pulling the small leather book from her bag. She held it aloft. Sarah Shaw's diary. Barnaby Shaw's face went white. She wrote that she was sick, that she knew she was dying before the baby was born. She knew she was leaving her child. "This is irrelevant," the lawyer said. But he looked nervous. "She wrote that she was terrified of her father," Ilara continued, her voice gaining strength. "She said he was a monster who would stop at nothing to possess what he believed was his. And she was right." "Your Honor!" Shaw roared. "But that's not the secret," Ilara said, her voice dropping, and she locked eyes with the judge. "She wrote about a man she loved, a man she really loved, a man her father forbade her from seeing and threatened to destroy, a man she met in secret back in Boston and again in Laramie, a man named Elias." The saloon went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. Judge Elias Thorne did not move. His face was carved from stone. Ilara's voice was barely a whisper, but it carried across the room. She was terrified her father would find out. She married Kalen, a good, strong man she knew could protect her, to hide her baby, to give her child a father who could stand up to the one she feared. Ilara took a step toward the judge's bench. She lied to Kalen. She let him believe Lily was his. Kalen, who had been watching, stunned, now looked at her. The blood drained from his face. "Ilara, no." "The diary says," Ilara pushed on, her heart breaking for Kalen, but knowing this was the only way, "that Kalen is a good man, the best man. But he is not Lily's father." Bombshell. The room exploded. Kalen stared at her, his face a mask of utter betrayal. Shaw looked confused, then a slow, calculating look entered his eyes. Ilara never broke her gaze from the judge. "She married Kalen to protect her baby, and to protect you, Your Honor. Isn't that right, Elias?" Judge Elias Thorne's gavel slipped from his numb fingers and hit the table with a dull thud. He knew, and he knew that she knew. Barnaby Shaw looked at the judge, and the realization dawned. His daughter, and this judge. The fury on his face was volcanic. This is a lie, this harlot." "Is it, Mr. Shaw?" The judge's voice was dangerously quiet, his composure snapping back, but his eyes were blazing at Shaw. "Or were you going to let me, the child's real father, sign away my own daughter to you? Were you going to use my bench to commit the ultimate fraud?" The tables had not just turned. They had been set on fire. Shaw was trapped. Harlan was trapped. Kalen was shattered. "This hearing," Judge Thorne said, standing, his voice thundering, "is over. In my chambers. Now." Judge Thorne's voice was lethal. "Mr. Shaw, Mr. Kalen, Mrs. Vance, Harlan, you wait outside." The small, whiskey-soaked back room of the saloon became the stage for the final act. The door closed. The pretense was gone. "Elias," Shaw hissed, "you will not believe the ravings of this woman." "Don't you dare!" Thorne snapped, his judicial calm completely gone. He was just a man who had been lied to and who had just found and almost lost a child. "She loved you, Sarah," he whispered, his eyes on Ilara's diary. "And you threatened me. You sent her away. You did this. She was my daughter. And Lily is mine." "She is my daughter," a low voice rumbled from the corner. They all turned. Kalen had been silent, absorbing the blast. He was pale, his world upended, but his eyes were not broken. They were clear. "I don't care what that book says," Kalen said, his voice level. "I don't care who her father is. I was Sarah's husband. I held her hand when she died. I buried her. And I am the one who has walked the floor for 2 weeks with that child. She is my daughter." He looked at Thorne. "You may have started her, but I am her father." It was a statement of fact that no one could dispute. A long, terrible silence filled the room. Ilara watched the 3 men, Shaw, the tyrant, trapped by his own pride. If this truth came out, his reputation was ruined. Thorne, the judge, compromised by his past, his career hanging by the thread of this secret. Caelan, the protector, the only one who had been honest about his intentions. "Here is what will happen," Thorne said, his voice regaining its judicial steel. He was a judge again, passing sentence. "Mr. Shaw, you will publicly withdraw your petition. You will cite Mr. Caelan's fitness and your desire to honor your daughter's marriage. You will then return to Laramie. If you ever come near this child again, or Mr. Caelan or Mrs. Vance, I will personally see that this diary is read into the territorial record. Am I clear?" Shaw was shaking with rage, but he was beaten. He nodded, a sharp, angry jerk. "Mrs. Vance! Mr. Caelan!" Thorne turned to them. "You committed perjury, a serious crime." Elara felt her knees weaken. "However," the judge continued, "it was under extreme duress, and in service of a greater truth. You will not be charged. This court is lenient." He then looked at Caelan, and for a second the judge was gone. It was just Elias. "You are a good man, Caelan. Better than she deserved. Better than I am. You will sign the official guardianship papers. You are her father. Legally. Undisputed." "And you, Judge?" Caelan asked. I will receive reports, from a distance, to know that she is, well, it was the plea of a father who knew he had no right to be one." Caelan nodded. "I can do that." They returned to the courtroom. Judge Thorne, composed and stern, dismissed Shaw's petition with prejudice, citing new information and granting full, undisputed custody of the child Lily to her father, Caelan. The town was baffled, but the verdict was final. Barnaby Shaw and Mr. Harlan were on the afternoon stage. Elara and Caelan walked back to the ridge. Neither spoke. The 1 week was over. The lie was done. The truth was out. They reached the cabin. Elara went inside and packed her small, meager bag. Caelan stood on the porch, holding Lily, watching her. She came out, her job complete. Caelan fumbled in his pocket and pulled out the leather pouch. The gold. "Your payment," he said, his voice hollow. Elara looked at the money. It was her freedom, her new life in San Francisco. "She used me, Elara," Caelan whispered, staring at the mountains. "Sarah, she used me. She trusted you," Elara said softly, stopping. "She didn't trust Elias to be strong. She didn't trust her father to be good. She trusted you. She trusted you to love that baby, no matter what. And she was right." Caelan looked down at the sleeping child in his arms. He nodded, a slow, pained acceptance. Elara clutched the money. "I should go. The stage leaves in the morning." She started to walk away. She got 10 yards down the path. "Elara!" She stopped, her back to him. This money." His voice was rough. "It was for 1 week of pretending. That's not what you did." She turned. He was standing there, silhouetted against the setting sun, a giant of a man holding a tiny baby. He looked lost. "You didn't just pretend," he said. "You fought. You saved her. You saved me. The bargain is void. I don't understand. This is a life's work," Caelan said, gesturing to the baby, to the cabin. "Raising her, and I can't. Not alone. I thought I was strong enough. I'm not." He took a step toward her. He wasn't begging this time. His eyes weren't shattered. They were searching. "I'm not Sarah's ghost, Caelan," she whispered, afraid of what he was asking. "I'm not a replacement." "I know," he said, his voice soft. Sarah was a story. She was a secret. You are real. Lily needs someone real." He took another breath. I need someone real. He didn't offer her the money. He just stood there, offering the truth. A hard life, a shared burden, a real family. Elara looked at the pouch of gold in her hand. It was an easy life, an escape. She looked at Kaelin and the baby. It was a hard life, a fight. But it was a home. Slowly, Elara let the heavy pouch of gold fall from her hand into the dust. She walked back to the cabin. She walked past Kaelin onto the porch. She turned and gently, wordlessly, took Lily from his arms. The baby stirred, smelled her, and settled. Kaelin watched her, his heart in his throat. I'll start a stew, Elara said, her voice quiet. You look exhausted. Kaelin closed his eyes, a single, hot tear escaping and tracing a line through the dust on his cheek. He nodded, then turned to the woodpile. They weren't in love. They weren't a fairy tale. They were two broken people, a secret-filled child, and a house on a ridge. But as Elara rocked the baby and Kaelin began to chop the wood for the evening fire, they were, for the first time, the truth. They found their family not in a lie, but in the wreckage of the truth. Kaelin, Elara, and little Lily, a family forged by survival, not by blood. Their story teaches us that true courage isn't about the lies we tell to protect ourselves, but the truths we're willing to face for the ones we love. A real family isn't what you're born into. It's the one you're willing to fight for. What did you think of Elara's final choice? Do you believe Judge Thorne did the right thing? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were moved by this story of resilience and finding home in the unlikeliest of places, please like this video, share it with someone who loves a powerful drama, and be sure to subscribe for more real-life historical storytelling every week. Your support keeps these stories alive.